I want to share with you a little bit of what I learned in our readings in the book of Matthew. You know, when Pastor Blake had asked me to share something from the readings, I sat down and I started going over our readings, started looking through some of the parables, and I started writing out on my piece of paper what I felt comfortable speaking about. And as I started picking certain topics that I thought I would choose from, I stopped and realized that exactly like we've been singing, the Holy Spirit was speaking to me directly. And I sat there and I traced some lines and I drew some things together, and I couldn't believe what I saw before my eyes. I felt as though God was answering my prayers that I've been recently praying. And one of the prayers that I recently have been praying about is to know what is God's will for my life. And I'm sure many of you have asked that same question. As a matter of fact, I'm sure some may have even been the question that led you here to church. And I felt moved to share what I had learned with you folks today, because maybe it would benefit you as well. So, as I was studying, I contemplated about our life. We travel on this road of life. We all have a road that we travel on. The road may have some hills, it may have some turns, it may have some smooth riding where we're going downhill and everything seems to be great. And what I found interesting is that God allows us to travel on that road on our own. He doesn't force us to take a specific road or go a certain way. And sometimes when we get to a point in our life where there may be two separate roads, we have to decide. And we may pray to God, we may ask for guidance, but ultimately we decide whether that's a good road or a bad road. We all make that decision. And I felt like God really wants us to know that. He wants us to know that He's given us permission to decide where we want to go in life. Even on those roads that we take are bad roads and really bad decisions, because we've all have done it. He doesn't stop us. As I was reading in Matthew 26, verses 47 through 56, about in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus was about to be betrayed by one of His own apostles. One of His apostles decided to take that wrong road. And even in those very last seconds before Jesus' arrest, He looked at that apostle. And in verse 50, He said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for." As I continued to study and read, I realized that He has given us some direction and some very easy to understand and powerful direction. I think it was very moving when He was questioned by the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 through 40. When He was questioned by the Pharisees, they were trying to pin Him on a difficult topic. They asked Him what the greatest commandment was. And He simply answered, to love God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul. And to also love others as yourself. I mean, He summed it up for us so simply. And I think when I think back about the question about what is God's will in my life, I think it's important that maybe we reflect on that as we make our decisions, that we make sure they adhere to what He asked of the commandments. And we all know that if we love God, we're going to follow His commandments, right? All of His commandments. And we all know His commandments, so I think it's important that we always reflect on them when we make decisions in our life. Another story that really stood out to me when deciding on my will, God's will in my life, was the story of the three servants and their talents. You know, God has blessed each one of us with certain talents. And I think sometimes, I know me personally, I may forget about that. We may all question our abilities. We may question what we can actually accomplish. And we may be afraid to get out and stand up and do things for God. But I don't think that's what's God's will in our life. He wants us to realize that he has blessed us, even with the small things. And he wants us not to bury those in the dirt and to hide them and forget about them, but to be bold, to stand up, to come before others, and to use those blessings that he's given you to teach and share what he is about. And you know, at the end of Matthew, I think it ties it together with the Great Commission. We all know Jesus returned here to earth. He met his disciples and he gave him one last word. In verses 16 through 20, Jesus said, "Go, make disciples in all nations." He preached to them from a hilltop, similar to this. And he said, "Go," he says, "teach new disciples to obey my commands that I have given you." And I think that as we reflect on God's will in our life, I think it's important to remember the Great Commission. I think he wants us to go there and spread his word wherever we are, whether we're at work, whether at the grocery store, whether at the gym, whether we're amongst our family. It's something that we should always have in our mind, and that is his will. So when I reflect back and I think about that question, while I was on my knees in prayer, and I'm asking, Lord, what is your will in my life? I can only imagine that God, if he were to speak to me, it would probably sound something like this. Jeff, I have given you the ability to decide, but remember to love me and others. Use your talents I have blessed you with, and tell everyone about me. And remember, I love you, and I will always be with you until the end. Thank you. I hope you all benefited from this as much as I did.